So I'm having a chili dog, and it's a thick, smoky style of dog that I made, and James is having a dog with some onions and sauerkraut, and we're having watermelon for dessert, and he's having turnip juice and some chili on the side. And today I made the carrot pulp hot dogs with this along with the carrot pulp and the regular hot dog spices. So those things, you could buy these things. They came from Bulk Barn originally. They were given to us, and I would not buy them. This soup is, one of the first ingredients is sugar, basically. It's terrible.
I thought you were going to use the four-letter S-H.
No. And this
that wouldn't be your
this
style.
This quinoa burger mix actually has pretty good ingredients listed, but it tastes terrible. It's just all you can really taste is the quinoa, which is not a good flavor. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this stuff? I'm very thankful for it because it was given to me, but I did not like it. So I thought I'd put it in the hot dog mix with the spices, and I tried a little bit, and I can't taste the quinoa anymore.
Hey,
so that's great. So James is going to be talking about a book while I drink my pumpkin latte minus milk. It's just pumpkin with spices. And I'm going to talk about these for a minute. Science fair, I say, because...
or unfair.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether... I was noticing that certain jobs for scientific kind of technician jobs were asking for some sort of computer program experience, right? And I was thinking, I wonder if they're now weeding scientists out of science and just saying, oh, well, the computer will do that for us, you know, and we can then hire in yellows for that position. Because honestly, watching this, one of the girls said she was talking about how she was an extrovert, and that's why she figured that she wins all the time.
She's an expert and good at talking.
Good at talking.
Wow,
so
okay.
She can talk the stuff she wins.
Yeah, so she's a motivational speaker. Yeah,
terrific.
Who needs that?
So that's what I'm wondering about.
She seems like a nice enough person.
Sure,
it's just she's been fed up. You know, she thinks she's better than she is because I think she won 4th place in her category, stuff like that, right?
Yep.
But I don't know how much tokenism is going on in these things. How do you judge these things objectively?
Yeah. Anyway, and I wonder anyway whether how fair they are, because I was mentioning to James junior high school when I finally realized that the people that were doing well in gym were the people who had, that, you know, came from wealthier parents who were sending them to gymnastics or whatever extracurricular kind of sports things, right? And so I said to the instructor, you haven't taught us this, how can you grade us on this, you know? And he's like, well, the other kids are doing it. And I'm like, yeah, they have gymnastics classes and stuff that they do. So yeah, they know how to do it, but you haven't taught us, you know? Anyway, so Eddie, Edie? I don't know. It has nice scenery. I didn't watch it. I watched a few bits with scenery.
Yeah, it was great scenery.
Yeah.
What can I say? So she ends up getting up to the top of a mountain, or maybe I'm giving it away. Spoiler alert! But it's like yelling 4 after you bonked someone on the head. I can remember I was doing work next to a golf course. And I almost got hit by the golf ball, but some people were on the green, and it was much closer to them. We were right next to the green doing work on the fence. And all of a sudden, the ball goes by, and then you hear people going, 4! That's too late.
Yeah.
You know, you should be saying, sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're probably wondering what your juice is. It's 4 turnips and some carrots.
Yeah, okay. It's going down fast. I could already taste it a little bit. So.
Oh, you could.
Yeah.
Well,
so it goes. I mean, it'll be healthy. You know, turnips taste lousy for a reason. Yeah.
The complete 6th season of the 100. I don't know how they got away with just
Yeah.
the pilot. How did they get through the pilot?
Yeah.
And honestly, these guys, they're such bad actors.
Yeah.
It's a complete crew of yellows.
They don't even
And-
have really token actors.
No.
in it, you know,
Nothing.
people with no looks and some acting chops. But wow, okay.
It's just about a bunch of violent people who keep being violent. And yeah, it's terrible. This is really, it's unwatchable. Yet I keep getting it from the library because it's available.
Well, it's awesome. It put me to sleep. I'm just hoping the 100 refers to the number of shows and not the number of seasons they're planning on putting out.
Yeah, really, it's just like there's Canadian funding for that, but it's a CBS thing, so it's an American thing.
Yeah, so
And,
it might have been filmed. It probably was filmed in
Probably
Canada,
was filmed
but
in Canada.
I'm not that enthused about my tax. I'm a concerned taxpayer. I hate
Yeah.
concerned taxpayers.
And before somebody-
Don't make me become a concerned
Somebody
taxpayer.
freaks out and says, "Oh, that's just a portion of Canadian funding." And if it's a penny, that's too much.
Too
That's a
much.
terrible show.
They should be
It's
paying
awful.
us to film up here, you know? Oh my gosh. Did you figure it was like the West Coast, like Vancouver? Or something
It's so
like that?
bad. Yeah, it'd
Yeah.
probably be. I think I noticed some mountain scenery.
Yeah, there we go.
Anyway, now this City on a Hill season 1. Kevin Bacon and
Steroid guy.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's actually not
handsome.
a bad-
and he's not a bad for the role. Whatever.
Bad guy. who
And
does
it
great
has
training,
that
too.
cute little lady off Criminal Intent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she ends up to be a good actress.
Yes.
Actor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's excellent.
yeah.
And I
She's got the
had
old
no
Boston
idea
accent
from
going.
the Criminal Intent.
Yeah.
She was so deadpan and
She's
everything.
not wearing the bleach on the hair and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I figured she was doing a pretty good job on Criminal Intent because she's playing like someone who's really shy and
Sure.
stuff like that.
After you see
Here,
this, you know
yeah.
she's an awesome actress.
Yeah.
So,
Who else is
Anyway.
there? Kevin Bacon.
yeah.
The funny thing is the best review we got for this is from the dogs. Because I was saying, Paris, do you like watching Kevin Bacon? That's one chihuahua. And she goes, yeah.
She perked up, and all the dogs were perking up.
All perked up.
And it
I
took
talked
us a
about
while
Kevin
to
Bacon.
figure out they like bacon.
They like bacon, not necessarily Kevin. But that was an
Yeah.
amazing review. I
Yes.
thought, wow, all of a sudden they're interested in TV.
Yeah. But anyway,
So Kevin Bacon, man, oh man, like we should get chihuahuas on the Oscar award board,
well, at first we didn't. Well, for me, I can't really speak for you, but I found it boring at first, and I'm like,
me
oh,
too.
this is dragging
It's
on.
always that way with these, like the things on, because they got so much time to develop things. And sometimes, I mean, this one was a little bit different, but sometimes you're watching season 2 and you didn't watch season 1. When you're watching a TV series, it's different from a movie. So
Yeah.
it takes a while to get into it, and
But I
it's
was
more like
getting
real
into
life
this
that way.
along the way. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, like it's set in Boston, I think, right?
Yeah, Boston, Revere
And-
Beach. They're talking about Walpole. They're talking about Quincy. I think they say Quincy.
And the music sounds kind of Celtic, right? And so you're listening to the theme music, and then you realize, these people, they're Irish.
Many
They're
are,
from
yeah.
Ireland and in America, and really, they say the Fighting Irish, right?
Yeah, that's
and,
Notre Dame, but
here they're
yeah.
they've somehow, the years pass, still violent, still corrupt, and what do you do, right? There's this African-American guy who's trying
When she
to
said these
write
people
things.
is talking about the Irish this way, I'm Irish too. So,
Okay.
it's just people, if they come from a certain extraction, they've got to, understand that they come from a tradition and try to transcend it. So,
Okay, corporate animals. I really enjoyed this one. This was
yeah.
set this one up so you
That
can
was an
remember
Ed
to watch
Helms
that one.
production. Ed Helms, if you're watching, thank you, buddy, for the money.
Really
that you put
funny.
into this one. Yeah,
And so Demi Moore is basically, I think she's supposed to be playing a driver type, like a dominant sort of.
Jim.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't want to stay up.
Yeah, we'll leave
Well,
it down there. That's how it goes.
A red, right?
Yeah.
She's supposed to be playing a red, so she's the head of the corporation, and she's ordering things to do. It's not a democracy. And Ed Helms is playing the yellow. And James pointed out he's doing the, what did you say? The stewardess sort of signaling or whatever?
When he was doing the thing, he was...
Which is perfect because
I can't remember all the stuff he was doing.
That's a yellow job, right? Stewardess.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the time, professional athletes, they'll end up marrying stewardesses
because they're, you know, like when I was a kid in hockey, they used to travel around by train because the National Hockey League was just in the northeastern United States and eastern Canada, which is basically southeastern Canada. But then somewhere along the line, I think it was around the time of expansion, then they, about 67, they expanded to Los Angeles. You can't take trains all the way from Montreal down there. So then they started doing planes, and then that's when Canadian hockey players started wanting to go live in the United States because they were marrying American stewardesses and stuff like that. And who wants to live in Edmonton, if you come from Macon, Georgia or whatever, right? So.
Well, a lot of the time though, like a lot of yellows put themselves into roles as nurses and stuff too. And I've heard a lot of people when they're in the hospital, they end up dating their nurse. I don't know how much truth there is to it, but I think a lot of the time people see people like stewardesses or whatever, and they see them as caregivers. They're not. They're not that at all. So they expect them to play that role. And I don't know how they feel about it once they get married.
Stewardesses are kind of this side of cheerleaders and beauty contestant winners. The traditional stewardesses. I don't know if they get, I was going to say cast, but get hired on the basis of their looks much anymore. I presume they are. But, so I do tests on how do you do this sort of stuff. I don't care what you look like. Just give me some good directions here. Anyway.
Corporate Animals, I'd highly recommend it.
Sure, we don't want to give too much away.
I don't want to give the movie away, but if you're a red or a yellow, hopefully you have a good sense of humor about it.
If you're a management arts...
If you're everyone else, you'll love it.
If you're a management arts grad or a student, get ready to bite your tongue and start gnashing your teeth, but that's the way it goes, People don't necessarily like you. You don't deserve to be liked necessarily. Okay, so Wall of Pain. This is Phil Spector, the guy producer behind, and he wrote some of these hits too, co-wrote them, most of them. To Know Him Is to Love Him. River Deep, Mountain High. You've Lost That Loving Feeling. He produced Unchained Melody, the classic one, the one that made it into the movies. That one that the Righteous Brothers did, where the guy's singing so high it's only dogs can really hear the top of his range and stuff like that. And I think actually that's the best version I've heard of it. But I'm open to different interpretations of that. So My Sweet Lord is George Harrison, imagined by John Lennon. A lot of these things went to number one. River Deep Mountain High was with Ike and Tina Turner. Well, just Tina Turner. Ike sat out on that one at Phil's demand. And weirdly enough, he was amazed that Ike actually stood down for that. But Ike knew that they'd do pretty well. Although that song initially only went to number 88, as I recall. They thought it was going to go to number one. Many of his best productions, like apparently Bobby Hatfield of the Righteous Brothers, was saying, "Hey, what part do I play in You've Lost That Loving Feeling?" And he says, "Well, just you collect the money because we're going to have a number one hit." This guy kind of knew it. Like the Rolling Stones' first hit in the United States, they were so excited. They came running to Phil Spector. Phil Spector actually worked on a couple of songs, 3 songs maybe on their first album. So it's a song called The Last Time. And they came running into Phil, and they said, "Where's it going to end up, number one?" He said, "Number 10, guys. Number 10. And it ended up number 9. So he had ears. But unfortunately, he also had paranoia. I'm afraid he might have been bipolar. I think he probably still is. I think he's doing some serious jail time because he's the producer who ended up killing an actress that he picked up. I think he was convicted of murder, but I'm very, it should have been something like manslaughter. My suspicion is he didn't really know this woman. I think what had happened is if he had someone that he liked or he'd known a long time and he was talking with them, he'd lock them in a place and he'd keep talking, right? So my suspicion is it should have been manslaughter and maybe kidnapping or something like that, because I think he put a gun to like John Lennon's neck, and stuff like that, and apparently these guns were loaded. Well, like eventually someone's going to go, and so he should be doing serious jail time. I mean, he was just playing with fire. He actually played bass. You know that Rolling Stone song, "Play with Fire"? Don't play with me. He played bass on that, and I think he scored the strings on it, stuff like that. I think the only Stones that were on it were Keith Richards and Mick Jagger himself the same. So I think that's one reason why that thing turned out well. But he was actually, give the devil his due or something like that. I used to think Jimmy Page was the guy that made John Bonham sound as though he was the hammer of the gods. John Bonham's the drummer for Led Zeppelin, because what Jimmy Page would do is he'd mic John Bonham in the next room, because it made it's an oral illusion. It made the drums sound as though they were just coming from hell, because they sound loud, but they sound as though they're from far away. Therefore, you say, can you imagine what they're like at the source to be this loud? And before then, I thought people mic'd right up next to the drum. Now, what Phil Spector would do, and he started his career in '58, so this is like 10 years before Led Zeppelin started to exist. What he'd do is, I think he's the first to mic inside the drum, but then he'd also mic outside of it as well. So he'd be getting this loud sound.
Weird.
He'd mic in different ways. I mean, he was, when you hear My Sweet Lord, it sounds like an orchestra of acoustic guitars at the start. Well, it probably was an orchestra of 60 guitars. He'd have the equivalent of a rock group. He'd bring 40 musicians in. I'm not exaggerating. 40 musicians. It might be something like 8 guitars and 3 pianos and 3 sets of drums, all playing at the same time. Can you imagine playing this? Because he wanted to mic it all live, because he wanted to stop bleeding from one mic to the other, to give it this huge orchestral sound. You know how an orchestra is. There's a ton of people there. You can see it, but you can also hear it. You hear all those strings going. I don't know how many they fit in an orchestra. 30, 3 dozen or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, he'd overdub, but I don't think he'd do too much of it. So you had to know your part. Well, rock and rollers aren't necessarily that good at knowing their parts. Mm-hmm. So you have to go through again and again. So that's where you'd be doing your individual work. Then he'd get them all together in the studio. And, 60 takes later, let's do 60 more takes, that sort of stuff, because someone blew it in the back there. Someone's out of tune or whatever. But the people that played on the Beach Boys things, this is where they got the start, like Glenn Campbell, Tommy Tedesco, Hal Blaine, and stuff like that. Larry Knepfel, they're called the Wrecking Crew. This is in Los Angeles.
Well, a lot of musicians, I suppose they'd be yellows, and they're really just acting as musicians. A lot of rock stars.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays, where they have to look good in a video or whatever. For the most part,
it's appalling
they're
now.
not going to sell, right?
Janis Joplin would never make it, right?
Yeah.
Jerry Garcia, the Grateful Dead, would never make it, But the Beatles might not make it, Like they have to have their teeth all fixed up, and Lennon would have to have his nose fixed up, and McCartney would have to have his teeth fixed up, and Harrison would have to have his canines filed and all that sort of stuff. So, anyway, it's a pretty good biography. It's not the longest. It could have been a whole lot longer, really. But who's going to know all the stuff like I do. There's a lot of people, but not that many. Not enough to sell the book. It's a pretty good book. It's fairly objective about him. I mean, he was abusive to his wives and all that sort of stuff, including the woman who sang "The Do Ron Ron Ron," Ronnie Spector. I think her original name was Ronnie Bennett or something like that. So the one thing you can say is I don't think he was that prejudiced. I mean, he married a black woman, and stuff like that. So.
And then beat her.
I don't know if he was that much into beating. He was into control, right?
Oh.
Controlling the way she dressed. Elvis was that way apparently too.
Oh.
Not letting
That's
her go out,
different.
which was terrible. It's like kidnapping. So there might have been some beatings.